There are certain sailboats that everybody already knows are good bargains. The Catalina 30, Pearson 365. We've talked about those for decades. But then there are boats that somehow become invisible. And it's not because they're rare. They're not especially expensive. They're not hidden in a barn beneath a family of extremely territorial raccoons. They're listed for sale everywhere, yet almost nobody talks about them. And right now, there is one very fast 3-cabin family size sailboat scattered all over North America for about $70,000. So, is the Beneteau First 36.7 the hidden gem on the used sailboat market? I started looking at these because one listing caught my attention, and then I found another one and another one. $64,000 in California, $68,000 in Connecticut, $69,000 in Chicago. There are examples in Toronto, California, Connecticut, Illinois, Maryland, everywhere in between. And this is not one desperate seller trying to escape a cursed French sailboat. There are currently 16 of these things on Yacht World, and the middle of the market is sitting roughly around 70,000 US dollars. That makes the first 36.7 fascinating because it's not a slow old cruiser that's finally depreciated into affordability. This was designed by Farr-designed as a proper performance boat. Beneteau's original brochure described it as a true 36-foot race boat with live-aboard comfort, an efficient deck plan, large cockpit for trimmers, and a deep lead keel. It was intended to follow the same basic formula as the wildly successful First 40.7, but in a smaller and somewhat more manageable package. And this is not some obscure model Beneteau built for 14 months before everyone quietly pretended it never happened. Approximately 800 of these were produced. It became a major one design class in North America, and U.S. Sailing still recognizes the First 36.7 as an established keelboat class on its own. When it was introduced, Sailing World named it the 2002 Boat of the Year for best value, calling it one of the hardest racer cruiser values to beat. So this boat was recognized as a bargain when it was brand new, and now it costs much less than it did 20 years ago. The strange thing is that I think the reason it's become a hidden gem is also the reason some people never even consider one. It's too racy for a lot of the cruisers, and it's too cruisy for a lot of the racers. A cruising buyer opens the listing and sees a giant wheel in the cockpit spanning mainsheet traveler, a saildrive and a fractional rig with a deep keel. They imagine 27 control lines and 6 angry people shouting about overlaps and starboard. Then the serious racer looks below and sees 3 cabins, a proper galley, a permanent nav desk, a large water supply, and an interior full of wooden doors. They decide it's carrying too much furniture and they go looking for something lighter and newer and considerably less pleasant to sleep aboard. So the First 36.7 falls into this peculiar crack between 2 groups of buyers. Is it a race boat for people who may never race seriously and a cruiser for people who actually enjoy sailing? That's where the opportunity lives here, because this thing is properly fast. The standard deep draft First 36.7 currently carries a Lake Ontario PHRF of 78. The shoal-draft version, 84. For anyone who doesn't speak PHRF, lower numbers generally mean much faster. A regular Beneteau Oceanus 34 appears on the same list with PHRF 144. So depending on the exact configuration, the first 36.7 is expected to sail roughly a minute per mile faster than a fairly modern normal cruising boat. That becomes 10 minutes over a 10-mile race. And it also becomes 10 fewer minutes you're going to be motoring because the wind is dying and everyone aboard is hungry. The boat is just under 36 feet long, 11 feet wide, and weighs a little under 13,000 pounds. Carries a large fractional sail plan, a fin keel with a bulb, and a spade rudder. The standard keel draws 7 feet, but the optional shoal is only 5 feet 11. Beneteau offers the standard boat with a 29 horse, about 20 gallons of fuel, and a surprisingly generous 71 gallons of water. That water capacity is going to matter. 71 gallons is not race boat camping anymore. It's enough water for a family to actually go somewhere without turning showering into a punishable offense. And the performance is not just a clever rating sheet trick. During practical sailors tests, the boat sailed close hauled at 6 knots in 15 knots of wind. When they eased onto a beam, it ran 7.2 to 8 with a balanced helm that they could steer with 2 fingers. The Farr hull carries volume toward the ends, increasing its effective sailing length as the boat heels, and the relatively generous rudder is designed to keep grip when the boat's pressed. This is the kind of performance that changes how you go cruising. You don't need to race this thing. You don't need matching shirts or a carbon fiber clipboard. But a boat that points higher and sails faster gives you choices. You can leave later. You can reach an anchorage before dark. You can sail through a light patch instead of immediately starting that diesel. And when you have to claw your way to windward, which eventually will happen, this boat actually goes to the place you're trying to reach, rather than cheerfully converting all the wind into sideways motion. This is why I keep coming back to these performance cruisers. If you genuinely enjoy the art of sailing, speed is not just about bragging rights. Efficiency makes the boat more useful. Hey, quick thing before we keep going. If you like the way we tell stories here on Lady K, I've also got a history channel called Hister-C, where we tell true stories about shipwrecks and disasters and strange voyages, forgotten wars, and the kind of history that feels like it should have been a movie. There's a link at the top of the screen right now, and I'll put another one at the end of this video. Go subscribe over there too, because if you like boats and survival and bad decisions and history getting weird, I think you're gonna love it. But what separates the 36-7 from many inexpensive race boats is there's actually an interior that you can live in underneath. There is a private cabin forward and 2 sleeping spaces aft. On many North American boats, Beneteau moved the aft dividing bulkhead off-center, creating a larger double berth to port and a smaller private berth to starboard. The smaller cabin can work for storage or storing one of your crew members that snores like a Detroit diesel. The saloon has 2 proper settees and a wooden table that folds and can be removed. With the table out, the stainless steel support becomes a handhold, and the saloon turns into a space where you'd store racing sails. There's a lot of clever things about this boat that make it do both jobs. Part of it is physically able to transform depending on whether you're cruising or racing. The cockpit lockers, for example, can be removed, creating more working room around the winches. The galley is sensible with a 2-burner stove, double sink, fridge, and useful enclosed storage. There's a forward-facing nav desk too, instead of a tiny folding shelf pretending to be a nav desk. You get that 20 horsepower Volvo with a saildrive, enough water to cruise properly, and 3 places where people can close a door and disappear. What you do not get, though, is an enormous head. The bathroom is charmingly compact, kind of tiny, and it's a wet head, and showering means becoming closely acquainted with nearly every surface in the room. But this is a 3-cabin boat with a beam of only 11 feet 4 inches. Space has to come from somewhere, and Beneteau chose to preserve the cabins and saloon rather than installing a bathroom large enough to host an America's Got Talent episode. The cockpit also tells you immediately what this boat values. This is not an Oceanus cockpit with a huge dining table and twin wheels and somewhere to lay out a cheese board the size of Rhode Island. The First has 1 enormous wheel, proper grinding positions, and a main sheet traveler running directly across the cockpit behind the helm. That traveler is excellent when you're sailing. It gives the mainsail trimmer real control and keeps the sheeting geometry correct. At anchor, however, it remains a large metal object exactly where someone would like to walk. Moving from the helm to the companionway requires navigating around the wheel and over the traveler. That's manageable, but it's not the best arrangement for someone whose greatest sailing priority is wandering freely between cockpit cushions while holding a bowl of nachos. Cockpit storage is also limited. The removable lockers are clever for racing, but this is not a boat with enormous cavernous lockers beneath the cockpit where you can lose 6 folding chairs and 2 bicycles for 9 years. Then we also need to discuss the keel on this boat because it's a big one. The standard 367 draws 7 feet, and that's magnificent when you're sailing upwind on Lake Ontario or San Francisco Bay. It's less magnificent when you're trying to enter a shallow anchorage in Florida. It narrows the number of marinas you can use, and it changes the anchorages available to you and makes every questionable patch of pale water considerably more exciting. But I don't think it's fair to say nobody wants the deep boat. Racers will want it. Great Lakes sailors could use it. West Coast sailors will probably not care. Anyone sailing in reliably deep water would get the version that's better upwind and performs better. But for the general cruising buyer like me, I think the shoal-draft boat is the hidden gem within the hidden gem. It draws 5 feet 11, which is still not Bahama's guncoaler, but it's far more practical than 7 foot 2. And according to the current Lake Ontario handicap table, the shoal boat gives away only 6 seconds per mile to the deep boat. That's 1 minute over 10 miles. For a cruiser, I'd happily give up that minute for another 15 inches of water beneath the keel. Of course, there's a reason we're looking at 20-year-old boats instead of ordering a new one and asking the dealership to put a large bow on it. Many first 36.7s have been raced. Racing itself doesn't destroy a boat, and racers usually are obsessive about maintenance, but racing creates loads and sail changes and crowded starts and the occasional sudden introduction between the keel and the planet Earth. The hull uses an internal structural grid to spread the loads from the keel, the mast, the engine, the chain plates, and the interior. The deck is balsa cord with solid laminate intended beneath the deck hardware. I would want a surveyor to inspect the grid to hull bond, the keel area, keel bolts, rudder, chain plate connections, stanchion bases, and high-load deck hardware very carefully. For approximately $70,000 though, you're getting a Farr-designed sailboat that can still race competitively, still race one design, sail quickly in ordinary conditions, point properly, carry a family, sleep people in separate cabins, and hold enough fresh water to cruise for more than a weekend. It's common enough that parts and owner knowledge and tuning information exist, but uncommon enough in cruising conversations that prices have not become ridiculous. This is not the perfect boat for everyone, I accept that, and it's not the boat I would choose for creeping through 3 feet of Bohemian water. It's not a floating apartment, and it's not ideal for someone who wants the cockpit to feel like an outdoor living room and considering 6 knots as an alarming speed. But for the sailor who enjoys efficiency, who might want a club race on Wednesday night, but take the family away on Friday and still have enough boat for a serious coastal trip, the first 36.7 makes an extraordinary amount of sense. Which is good because the mission here at Lady K Sailing has always been to get more people sailing more easily, and I sure couldn't do it without you guys. You're liking and commenting and subscribing. Do me a favor and say something in the comments on this video. Would you rock a 367? Why or why not? And if I've ever helped you in your boating, consider helping me back in my mission to get more people on the water by becoming a patron. Until next time, friends, keep the heavy side down, but not too far down. I love you guys.